Archaeologists just unearthed this huge feline figure that was carved into a hillside more than 2,000 years ago. Look at that.
An algorithm just did what humans couldn't do in 100 years. It scanned the barren plains of Peru, and in just a few months it found them. 303 new, monstrous figures carved into the earth. These aren't just random shapes. They're a lost message from the ancient Nazca people. For centuries, we've stared at the famous hummingbird and the spider, but we were missing the darkest parts of the story. The AI didn't just find more pictures, it uncovered a pattern, a ritual, and a purpose that is genuinely unsettling. 303 new nightmares. For the better part of a century, the Nazca lines in southern Peru have been one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. Sprawling across more than 400 square miles of arid desert, these gigantic geoglyphs depicting everything from a hummingbird to a monkey to a spider are so massive they can only be properly seen from an airplane. It's a real head-scratcher. How, and more importantly, why, did an ancient culture create art they themselves could never fully see? Theories have run wild, from complex astronomical calendars and guides to underground water sources, all the way to the pop culture favorite, landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors. It's funny when you think about it. We've looked to the stars for an answer, but the real breakthrough came from something much closer to home: artificial intelligence. In 2024, a team of researchers from Yamagata University, working with IBM, unleashed a powerful AI on the Nazca Plateau. Think about this. For nearly 100 years, archaeologists using planes, drones, and painstaking fieldwork managed to identify around 430 geoglyphs. It was slow, grueling work. The AI did something that sounds like science fiction. In just 6 months, a blink of an eye in archaeological terms, it identified 303 new figures. Let that sink in for a moment. The AI accomplished in half a year what took humans a century, nearly doubling the known number of geoglyphs. It was 20 times faster than any method we've ever used. The game had officially changed overnight. So, how did it work? The AI was fed high-resolution satellite images, aerial photos, and advanced LiDAR scans of the desert. LiDAR can essentially see through the surface, mapping tiny variations in the landscape that are invisible to the human eye. The AI was trained on the existing, known geoglyphs, learning to recognize their faint outlines and subtle patterns. Once it knew what to look for, it scanned the entire region. The results were staggering. The system flagged over 47,000 potential sites. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, except the AI had just handed the scientists a giant magnet. From there, the human researchers narrowed the list down to just over 1,300 high-probability candidates, and through on-the-ground verification, confirmed 303 of them. But here's the kicker. These weren't just more of the same. The AI discovery unveiled two distinct types of geoglyphs that tell a much darker, more complicated story. The first group, called relief type, were smaller, averaging around 30 feet long. They were often found near ancient trails and pathways, depicting humans, domesticated animals like llamas, and, most disturbingly, severed heads. These weren't grand displays for the gods in the sky. They were messages for people walking on the ground. The second type, the line type, were the massive figures we're more familiar with, some stretching up to 295 feet. These depicted wild animals and were connected to larger ceremonial sites. And among these discoveries was one image so bizarre, so specific, that it sent a chill down the spine of the entire archaeological community. Etched into the desert was a 72-foot-long depiction of an orca, a creature of prey. But this was no ordinary orca. In its grasp, it held what can only be described as a large, sharp implement, a ceremonial blade. This single image, hidden for 2,000 years, was the key. It connected the silent lines in the desert to the Nazca's most feared rituals, suggesting a purpose far more unsettling than anyone had dared to imagine. What the AI found wasn't just more art, it was evidence of a belief system we're only now beginning to understand. The ancient message was no longer silent, but what it was saying was far from peaceful. A canvas of dust and bone. Before we can truly grasp the terrifying significance of what the AI found, we need to peel back the layers of time and understand the people who created these masterpieces. Who were the Nazca? And what kind of world did they live in that would compel them to carve giant pictures into the ground? Believe it or not, the Nazca civilization flourished in one of the driest places on Earth from around 200 BCE to 700 CE. We're talking about a place that gets less than an inch of rain per year. Survival itself was a daily miracle, and in this harsh landscape, their culture became incredibly rich and complex. They were master engineers, creating sophisticated underground aqueducts called puquios to bring water from the Andes Mountains to their settlements. Some of these are still in use today, a testament to their genius. They were also brilliant artists, known for their stunningly detailed and colorful pottery. And it's this pottery that gives us our first major clue. The ceramics are covered in images of their daily life, their gods, and their rituals. We see farmers, fishermen, and musicians, but we also see warriors, mythical creatures, and depictions of ceremonial acts. The same figures we see on their pots, condors, monkeys, spiders, and humanoids are the very same figures they etched into the desert floor on a colossal scale. It's almost as if they were projecting their entire worldview onto the land itself. For decades, the prevailing theories about the lines tried to find a practical purpose. Maria Reich, a German mathematician who dedicated her life to studying the lines, famously proposed they were a giant astronomical calendar with lines aligning to the sun, moon, and stars during solstices. It's a beautiful idea that these people were speaking the language of the cosmos. Another popular theory suggested the lines were related to water rituals, a desperate plea to the gods in an unforgiving climate. The animal figures were thought to represent water-related deities, and the straight lines were believed to point to underground water sources. These theories made sense. They painted the Nazca as peaceful astronomers and farmers. Then came the fringe theories. In the late 1960s, author Erich von Däniken published Chariots of the Gods, and the Nazca lines were thrust into the global spotlight as proof of ancient alien contact. The idea was simple and seductive. The lines were runways for alien spacecraft. How else could they be so perfectly straight and so massive? This theory captured the public imagination, but archaeologists have consistently dismissed it. The truth is, creating the lines didn't require advanced technology. With simple tools, wooden stakes, rope, and a clear understanding of geometry, a small group of people could create even the largest figures. By removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles on the surface, they revealed the lighter-colored sand underneath. In the hyper-arid climate, with little rain or wind to disturb them, these shallow trenches have remained almost perfectly preserved for 2 millennia. So if it wasn't aliens and it wasn't just a calendar, what was it? The truth is far more intimate and, frankly, more intense. The Nazca world was one of deep spiritual belief, where the lines between the physical and the supernatural were blurred. They believed their gods and ancestors walked among them, and that the landscape itself was sacred. The geoglyphs weren't just pictures, they were active ritual spaces. Archaeological evidence shows that people walked these lines, almost like a pilgrimage. Broken pieces of high-quality pottery have been found deliberately smashed at the intersections of lines, suggesting ceremonial offerings. These were not just drawings to be seen, but pathways to be experienced. They were connecting with their gods, not by looking up at the sky, but by walking on holy ground. But even this doesn't explain the full story. It doesn't explain the obsession with certain images or the darker elements that kept appearing on their pottery. And it certainly didn't prepare anyone for what the AI was about to confirm. The discovery of the smaller trailside geoglyphs and the ominous figure of the orca changed the narrative from one of peaceful worship to something much, much darker. The lines weren't just about tracking stars or praying for rain. They were about power, life, and a currency that could appease the most terrifying of gods. The Nazca weren't just talking to their gods. They were giving them a tribute they couldn't refuse. The blade, the heads, and the horrifying truth. This is where the story takes a dark turn. The AI didn't just find more drawings. It uncovered the Nazca's grimmest secrets. For years, the images on their pottery told a disturbing story that many scholars preferred to view as purely symbolic. But the new geoglyphs dragged that story out of the realm of myth and etched it into the very earth. Let's start with the most shocking discovery: the 72-foot-long orca holding a blade. What's so crazy about this is that orcas, or killer whales, were a powerful symbol in Nazca culture. They were seen as fearsome hunters of the sea, apex predators. On their pottery, orcas are often depicted holding severed human heads, known as trophy heads. And now, here it was, carved into the desert for all time, not just an animal, but a life-taking creature armed with a ceremonial tool. This wasn't a symbol of nature, it was a symbol of a ritual act. The blade connects the power of the animal to the act of a ceremonial offering. Now, combine this with the other new discoveries. The AI found numerous relief-type geoglyphs, the smaller ones located by paths. Among these were figures of warriors, and chillingly, multiple depictions of those very same trophy heads. These weren't abstract symbols. They were stark, in-your-face declarations of power and ritual. Imagine walking along an ancient trail and seeing these figures carved into the hillsides, a constant reminder of the price of power and favor from the gods. This forces us to reevaluate everything. The Nazca lines were likely part of a complex state religion, one that involved ceremonial tributes to appease powerful and often terrifying deities. The larger, line-type figures of animals like the condor, the monkey, and the new orca were likely created for massive community-wide ceremonies. People would gather, walk the sacred lines, and perform rituals to ensure a good harvest, victory in battle, or simply the continued flow of water. The Nazca believed that these powerful animal spirits had to be nourished, and on their pottery, the nourishment they demanded was life itself. The depictions of trophy heads aren't just about warfare. They are deeply tied to agriculture and fertility. The Nazca seemed to believe that by making these offerings, they could capture the life force of an individual and transfer it to the earth, ensuring their crops would grow. It's a chilling thought. The beautiful hummingbird geoglyph, stretching over 300 feet, might not just be a celebration of nature, but a symbol of a deity that demanded the ultimate price. The long, straight lines that crisscross the desert for miles might not be pointing to stars, but instead be sacred pathways leading to places where these offerings were made. The Cahuachi Temple, a major Nazca ceremonial center, has been a site of grim discoveries. Archaeologists have found large caches of trophy heads there, many with a hole drilled in the forehead, so they could be strung on a rope and displayed. The skulls often show signs of ritual preparation. This was not random violence, it was a deeply ingrained part of their faith. The AI's discovery of 303 new figures, many with these dark undertones, fills in the missing pieces of this gruesome puzzle. It suggests these rituals were far more common and widespread than previously thought. The smaller geoglyphs by the trails were a form of public messaging, reinforcing the belief system to everyone who passed by. They were a constant, silent sermon written in stone and sand, reminding the people of the power of their gods and the necessity of the offerings. The Nazca lines in this light transform from a beautiful, ancient mystery into a sprawling, landscape-sized altar dedicated to a religion built on life-taking tributes. The terrifying part isn't a monster or an alien. It's the stark realization that this incredible feat of art and engineering was likely created to serve a system of ritualized violence. The lines weren't a map to the stars, but a guide to a ceremony we were never meant to understand. When the past became a nightmare. So let's just hit the brakes here for a second and really process this. An artificial intelligence, a ghost in the machine, has basically reached back 2,000 years and rewritten a huge chapter of human history. All those years of wondering, all those books about ancient astronauts and celestial maps, they've been vaporized by a single groundbreaking discovery. The truth, it seems, isn't out there in the stars. It's right here in the dirt. And it's far more human and far more disturbing than we ever imagined. The idea of ritual offerings and a faith built on life-taking tributes is chilling enough. It paints a picture of a desperate, brilliant people doing what they thought was necessary to survive in an impossible landscape. But here's the thing. What if that's just the first layer? What if the AI, in solving one mystery, accidentally unlocked a door to several more, each one darker than the last? Now, this is where things go from unsettling to straight-up nightmare fuel. Some researchers looking at the sheer scale and psychological power of these images are floating new theories that make the first one look tame. One of the wildest ideas is that the Nazca lines weren't just a tribute to the gods, but a form of mass mind control. Think about it. This wasn't just art, it was an environment. The Nazca people lived and breathed these symbols. The newly discovered trail-side geoglyphs of warriors and trophy heads acted as a kind of ancient propaganda, a constant, silent reminder of the state religion's power. Now, imagine walking for miles along one of the Great Lines, often in large, organized groups, as part of a pilgrimage. The act of walking, the rhythmic chanting, the desert heat, the sheer visual overload of the sacred geometry. It could have been designed to induce a trance-like state. It could have been a way for the ruling priest class to ensure obedience, to literally etch their ideology not just into the land, but into the minds of the people. The lines weren't just for seeing, they were for doing. And that doing could have been a form of mass social engineering. But if that theory doesn't keep you up at night, try this one on for size. What if we've got it all backward? We assume the Nazca were trying to summon their gods or get their attention. What if instead they were trying to keep something out? Or even scarier, keep something in? This theory suggests the entire Nazca Plateau is a massive supernatural prison or a protective ward. The hundreds of geoglyphs of powerful animal spirits, the orca, the condor, the spider, weren't just symbols, they were spiritual guardians. The thousands of miles of dead straight lines and complex geometric trapezoids weren't pathways, they were the bars of a celestial cage, drawn with mathematical precision to create a containment field. The ritual offerings then weren't to appease gods, but to provide the grim energy needed to maintain this massive prison. It turns the whole narrative on its head. The Nazca weren't worshiping, they were fighting. They were the eternal jailers of some unnamed, unseen horror. What could they have been so terrified of that they would dedicate centuries of their existence to building a prison the size of a modern city? The AI discovered images of strange, abstract humanoids that don't quite fit their known artistic style suddenly take on a much more sinister meaning. Maybe they weren't drawing themselves, but they're prisoners. And then there's the theory that is perhaps the most mind-bending of all. What if the Nazca lines are a biological or even a genetic blueprint? It sounds crazy, but the Nazca were obsessed with transformation. Their art is filled with anthropomorphic beings, creatures that are part human, part animal. What if they believed that through intense ritual and connection to these geoglyphs, they could literally alter their own spiritual DNA? The giant hummingbird isn't just a picture of a bird, it's a diagram of the spiritual essence of speed and agility. The monkey represents cunning, the spider represents creation. By walking these lines and performing the rituals, they weren't just praying to these spirits, they were trying to absorb their traits, to become more than human. In this light, the lines are a kind of esoteric technology for spiritual evolution. This could explain why some of the figures have strange anomalies like the famous spider geoglyph, which seems to depict a rare, obscure species from the Amazon hundreds of miles away, a species with a unique reproductive appendage on one leg that the Nazca somehow depicted perfectly. Or was it a map for a transformation they never completed? The scariest thing about the AI's discovery isn't that it gave us one dark answer. It's that it opened a door to many new ideas, and each one is spookier than the last. For years, we thought the Nazca lines were a simple puzzle. Maybe they were made by aliens. That was an easy story, almost like something from a comic book. But the truth is much weirder. The AI has shown us that the answer isn't about aliens at all. It's about what real people who lived long ago were capable of. And that's what makes this so chilling. The new theories are what really get you thinking. What if the lines weren't for gods in the sky, but were used to control the minds of the people on the ground? Imagine being told to walk these giant paths every day, seeing pictures of powerful creatures and severed heads. It would be like a constant spooky message telling you how to think and act. Or, get this, what if the lines were a giant cage? Maybe the Nazca people weren't praying to something, but were trying to trap a terrible monster we don't know about. The giant animal drawings would be the guards, and the strange lines would be the bars of the cage. The rituals weren't to make gods happy, but to power the lock on this massive prison. This is why the mystery hasn't been solved. It has just changed into something bigger. The AI is like a special pair of glasses that lets us see patterns that have always been hidden. One day, it might find a secret code made of numbers in the lines, or a special kind of power we can't feel yet. The old idea of alien visitors has been replaced by very real and very scary questions about our own ancestors. Were they priests who controlled people's minds? Were they brave jailers locking away a monster? Or were they trying to become something more than human? The Nazca lines are still amazing to look at, but now they have a different feeling. It's a feeling of awe mixed with a little bit of fear. It wasn't aliens from another planet who did this. It was people with a belief system so powerful and so strange that it feels like they were from another world entirely. We may never fully understand what they were trying to do, and that is the most terrifying thought of all. The desert has finally spoken thanks to AI. But what if this chilling purpose was just one of many? What other lost civilizations have messages waiting for a machine to read them? Let us know your theories below. And if you want to explore more mysteries, make sure to like and subscribe.